Over the past 10 or so years that Destiny has been around, the Warlock class has undergone many changes, from PvE to PvP changes, and it's even had complete exotic reworks. Throughout these years, the Warlock class has been extremely powerful, and whether you main or hate the Warlocks, you can't deny the fact that at some points in the history of Destiny 2, they have been completely broken. So let's cover the top 5 moments where Warlocks were completely broken in Destiny 2's history. Just a quick clarification here, these top 5 moments were builds that players created throughout the years that lasted for plenty of time in Destiny 2 before they eventually got nerfed. I'm not really talking about broken glitches that lasted a couple days. I'm mainly talking about builds in the game that players were using for a period of time that were just completely overpowered and eventually got nerfed by Bungie. A lot of this footage is pre-nerf footage, so a lot of this gameplay is from the past, and I've borrowed it from other YouTubers, and I'll be referencing all of them in the description and on the screen throughout the video. Now, in no particular order, let's start off with number 1, and that is definitely the pre-nerf Starfire Protocol Warlock build. This is arguably the strongest Warlocks have ever been in terms of pure boss damage. We have the pre-nerf Starfire Protocol. Now, if you've ever played a Warlock, you will know exactly what I'm talking about when I mention pre-nerf Starfire Protocol. Basically, we all know how this exotic works to this day. You stand in an empowering rift, and dealing damage to any enemies slowly grants your grenade energy back. However, about 1 to 2 years ago, pre-nerf to this exotic, the amount of grenade energy that you received from doing damage to bosses was completely insane. You could literally throw a fusion grenade every single second, and at some point in time, you would have an abundance of grenade energy, and your grenades would be recharging before you could even throw them. You could pretty much throw these indefinitely as long as you had a DPS phase going. Now, what made this even more powerful than what it already sounds like it is, was the fragment that allowed these fusion grenades to explode twice on boss. Obviously, these grenades exploding twice cause lots of scorch stacks on the bosses, which then cause an ignition for even more damage. This was just, at the point in time, incredible amounts of damage, and anytime you ever did a raid and you saw a Warlock with the Starfire Protocol on, they would 100% be at the top of the damage meters by hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of damage by the end of the boss phase. Now, the experienced Warlocks would also be pairing this build with a rocket launcher that also had the perk Demolitionist on it. If you know what this perk does, basically throwing a grenade while this perk is active will reload that gun for you. So a very simple but effective strategy for the Warlock was to shoot the rocket launcher, throw the grenade. Shoot the rocket launcher, throw the grenade, and it would automatically reload for you, and you would basically just never have to reload, and as long as you have rocket launcher ammo, you are shooting rockets and causing ignitions and massive fusion grenade damage. This build was definitely completely busted, and go figure, Bungie inevitably nerfed this exotic, but it was extremely fun while it lasted. The rotation for this was extremely easy, allowing pretty much any player to pick this up and excel at it within seconds. You put a well down, and you stick the boss with a Witherhoard. As we all know, that's a damage over time, and this would slowly tick the boss, granting you grenade energy. From here on out, you would pull out your rocket launcher, you'd shoot a rocket, you'd throw a grenade, shoot a rocket, throw a grenade, then you'd pull the Witherhoard back out, shoot that, go back to your rocket launcher, and you would just spam grenades and rocket launchers, and it was extremely satisfying. Moving over to our next build, and in number 2, and continuing on with the idea of spamming grenades, every Warlock main remembers pre-final shape how much ag clear capability Warlocks had with the exotic Sunbracers. This exotic was super simple to use. Kill any enemy with a powered melee, and you would have 5 seconds to spam out as many solar grenades as you possibly could. The idea of this build was to get your melee charge down time as much as possible, so that you could cover the map in massive solar orbs, and basically kill everything you could see. Many bonuses, and what made this build extremely strong was all of the fragments that boosted solar grenades in the Warlock subclass. Fragments like Ember of Resolve, which cures you when you kill enemies with grenades. Ember of Torches, which makes you radiant with powered melee attacks, allowing you to do more damage. And aspects like Touch of Flame, which increases the grenade duration and makes them do more damage by dropping blobs of lava all over the map. Combining all of these factors, this build was truly a staple ground for all Warlocks. However, apart from all the damage, what truly made this build unstoppable was the tech that was involved by running it. By running Heat Rises, you could consume your grenade, granting yourself Cure. If you paired this with Ember of Benevolence, you would self-proc this fragment. And now, getting grenade kills with Benevolence active would cure you and reset the cooldown of Benevolence, practically allowing you to be full health pretty much all the time. This fragment also gave 400% increased ability regeneration, allowing you to practically get your melee back before your grenade spam even ends. It was truly a moment to be a Warlock main at this point in the game. Players also found a bug with some raid bosses like Riven, where you could literally solo kill a raid boss all by yourself with this loadout in just seconds, with the lava damage dropping from the blobs completely deleting Riven in seconds. Take a look at this clip. Bungie, of course, saw this and slightly nerfed Sunbracers to where other builds just became a little bit better. Moving on to our next point in time, this is a little bit of a flashback to about 2 to 3 years ago. This one is PvP focused, and although in general this build wasn't busted for most players like the other ones were so far, if you were a decent PvPer in Trials of Osiris, you would definitely know how strong this build was pre-nerf Geomag stabilizers. If you were a very good Trials of Osiris player in the 3v3 category, you would definitely be rocking the Geomag stabilizers if you were running Warlock. Warlocks have always been pretty decent in PvP, however Hunters definitely take the crown as the best overall class for PvP, I would personally say. However, back when Geomags were as powerful as they were, I would argue that Warlocks were definitely on top. Now everyone knows how the current Geomag stabilizers work. Basically just dealing damage with Chaos Reach just extends the duration. However, the old Geomags were completely busted and they had to completely remove this perk on these exotics. They basically allowed you to finish about 1/4 of your super bar by simply sprinting around. Yes, I know, that sounds completely broken. Now, in a 3v3 environment in Trials of Osiris, having a super for your team basically confirms that round a victory for you and your team. So after 2 to 3 rounds of, most Trials games, most Warlocks would be a good chunk, if not 3/4 of their way to a super, pretty much far ahead of anyone else at this point in the game. By this time in the game, they would slowly delay the game and send their Warlocks sprinting around in circles to boost at least that last quarter of their super bar and giving them a free super before anyone else in the game even had one. They would then rush the team and, secure a couple kills instantly, confirming the round and giving your team a massive lead. And of course, if you're running more than one Warlock on your team with Geomag stabilizers, you could pretty much have a Chaos Reach ready for every single round, completely dominating the other team. Chaos Reach in PvP is also a very decent shutdown super, so you could even just save it for any other team. If they pop, an offensive super on you, you can use your Chaos Reach to shut them down, and then practically giving your team the win. Any decent PvPer that played Trials of Osiris back in the day will definitely remember how dangerous a Warlock was with the Geomag stabilizers. Moving on to probably one of the funnest builds that the Warlocks has ever had in the past, it was the Infinite Poison / Suspension Strand build. Now this build is still very viable to this day, however what sort of killed this build was the nerf to the Osteo-Striga, and unfortunately it's still a decent build, but just not what it used to be. This build heavily relied on that exotic gun, and with its nerf, it sort of fell apart. Pairing the Osteo-Striga, players use the Necrotic Grips, which work with Weapons of Sorrow, and obviously the Osteo-Striga counts as a Weapon of Sorrow. Pairing these two things together, it would spread poison all across the battlefield and basically just kill and suspend everything on the map. Pairing this again with other fragments and aspects, this build was far ahead of its time. Now the main attraction to this build at the time was the fact that you could not only infinitely spread poison to slowly kill enemies, but you could also chain suspend enemies, rendering them useless. This build revolved around the Mindspun Invocation aspect. Basically, consuming your grenade would give you the buff that final blows create a suspending detonation. Now this had a small internal cooldown, but it was so small that it pretty much didn't matter, and at the time it would easily chain suspend a whole room of adds. And obviously while it was chain suspending enemies, it was also chain spreading poison everywhere, killing and suspending a whole room of adds in seconds. Pair this with the continuity fragment, which increases suspend duration, the generation fragment, which allowed for faster grenade generation, and of course getting woven mail, Warlocks were truly a class to be considered for your main during this time. It was just too fun and too overpowered to avoid not playing Warlock. This build was so strong that players were soloing Grandmaster Nightfalls and walking through raids. It was seriously one of the funnest builds that Warlocks have had. And finally, bringing us to number 5, to wrap this list up, we have the Arc Soul build, which to this day is still incredibly strong, and a lot of Warlocks mains go to this setup. Personally, I still use this build every single day and have since the final shape was released. This build was created with the Prismatic being brought to the game, and it is still incredibly strong. If you've played the game since Prismatic was brought into the game, you will know exactly what this build is and what I'm talking about. This build obviously revolves around the Warlock exotic getaway artists. And I'm not going to dive too deep into this build because it is still a current build that everyone uses that is extremely powerful, and pretty much everyone knows what this build is. Basically, you consume your arc grenade, which does many things for you. First of all, it grants you an arc buddy. This deals damage for you and also counts as an ability kill, which will proc Devour for you, which is obviously the other aspect that you will be running because Devour is just completely insane. While Devour is active, you fully heal off any kill, and it will also reset the Devour timer. Probably the best perk in the game. The second thing consuming your grenade does for you is it will also spawn a stasis turret at your feet, with the aspect Bleak Watcher. This turret slows and freezes enemies, slowly controlling the battlefield for you. And the third thing it does for you as well is it makes you amplified. Being amplified means many things for you. Intrinsic 15% damage reduction, a small speed boost, more mobility and handling, and the enemies around you are less likely to hit you. A very underrated perk. Combining all these things in with the fact that you are running Prismatic and you have Transcendence, this build is completely busted and everyone knows exactly what it is, and everyone still uses it to this day if they play Warlock. But anyway, Guardians, that will pretty much wrap up there the top 5 moments in Destiny 2's history where Warlocks were completely busted. Let me know in the comments down below what your favourite era was of when you played Warlock and you had the most fun and you also felt the most powerful. Make sure you stick around and subscribe to the channel because I will be covering the Hunters and the Titans next with the same type of video. But again, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Later.